Greetings, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to part 2 of chapter 11 of the Grand Design Exposed, called Architects of the Grand Design. And we stopped and we concluded the section entitled French and German Freemasonry United to Launch French Revolution, and we concluded that section. And now we're going to pick up in the following section, which is called Adam Weishaupt, Bavarian Illuminati. And the famous Adam Weishaupt, you know, the man that all of these truthers and these types of things will research over and over again, and will explain that, you know, the Illuminati is behind everything and these types of things. And Adam Weishaupt was a Jesuit priest who supposedly severed ties with the Jesuits and these types of things. But and these come from people that are supposedly ex-Illuminati people and these types of things that expose these things. But the question lies and remains is, was Weishaupt playing the role of an ex-Jesuit priest, even though at the same time he was still well Jesuit educated, and his Illuminati had the backing of the Jesuit order and was supported by the Jesuit order? And so this is what this is going to cover. So we're going to basically be concluding this chapter, because the majority of the rest of this chapter deals exclusively about Adam Weishaupt. And again, after this chapter is concluded, I will be adding the book sources of references that you can use for your own research. So just be patient for those to appear in the description box. So, Adam Weishaupt's Bavarian Illuminati. It was in South Germany where this setting came fully into play. According to the 1910 Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 8, page 8, the topic Ingolstadt, it says, quote, "A movement was inaugurated in 1772 by Adam Weishaupt, professor of canon law, with a view to securing the triumph of the rationalistic, quote-unquote, enlightenment in church and state by means of the secret society of Illuminati, which he founded," unquote. Okay, so just to stop right here, this Adam Weishaupt was still taught in Ingolstadt. He never recanted his professorship of canon law. He was always a supporter of canon law. And so that begs the question, did he really sever ties, or did he play the role of having his ties severed? Anyways, continuing. Now, logically, every movement needs a leader. However, good sense should tell anyone that regardless how great a genius a man might be, it would be next to impossible for one man to launch a movement such as the quote-unquote Enlightenment during those days, especially in the stronghold of Catholic southern Germany. This is where he did his schooling. This is where he came up with his Bavarian Illuminati. Unless there was an august body in complete cooperation with, or actually instigating, the movement. It must be remembered that in 1772, Adam Weishaupt was a very young man of only 24 who had, as a fact, received his complete education from the Jesuits. Nowhere else. That's where he received his education from. So where did he get his liberal inclinations if it wasn't from his educators, the Jesuits? One must never lose sight of the specific purpose for which the Jesuit order was raised up, which was to counter and eradicate all that Protestantism had ever accomplished. The Jesuits the world over were renowned for their zeal, especially their extraordinary success in stopping Protestantism dead in its tracks in Europe and restoring it back to Rome. But for 45 years, as the Enlightenment movement started and progressed into the French Revolution, there is not hardly so much as a whimper in the Jesuit realm to condemn this blight that was allegedly again shaking up Rome. Even worse, the origin of the hardcore element of the movement is found, of all places, in the two most model cities of Jesuitism, Ingolstadt and Munich, where the Illuminati was founded. Now, isn't this just a mite bit suspicious? Adam Weishaupt was brilliant and well trained by the Jesuits in the conspiratorial methods of access to power. Adam's father, also a professor at Ingolstadt University, had died when Adam was only 7. The curator of Ingolstadt University, Baron Joseph Adam of Eichstätt, a liberal member of the Privy Council of the Elector, who had begun to liberalize the university, was named Adam's godfather, who took him into his care after Adam's father had died. In 1774, when the chair of canon law became vacant at the university, Baron Eichstätt appointed to the chair his 26-year-old godson. These undisputed facts reveal not only the Jesuits, but also the liberal Jesuit surroundings that young Adam Weishaupt was raised and thrust into. Soon he is to be appointed again as leader of the Bavarian Illuminati movement. The order of the quote-unquote very perfectibles, better known as Illuminati, that's one of the other names of the Illuminati, is very perfectibles. Never hear that from any of these ex-Illuminati guys. Was founded on May Day of 1776 by Adam Weishaupt and 5 original members. His strictly hierarchical organization was the very pattern, the very same pattern of the Society of Jesus, who regarded as essential, in order to realize his plans, the despotism of superiors and the blind, unconditional obedience of subordinates, which included the utmost secrecy and mysteriousness. Now, again, if the Illuminati is patterned off of the order of the Jesuit order, okay, with the same hierarchical structure, nothing at all different about it, other than the name. Then what does that really tell you about the Illuminati? Okay, or these very perfectibles? It also peddled Freemasonry's alluring utopian Golden Age dream concerning the dilapidation of old things and the need of new. This was being vigorously agitated by the writings of Voltaire, Rousseau, Diderot, and their fellows, who questioned, criticized, and undermined the social, political, and ecclesiastical fabric built by past centuries. Men were taught that, unhampered by old decrepitude, by antique customs, superstitions, and beliefs, would show themselves innocent, virtuous, and capable, and build up a new society in which all men should be happy. This romantic enthusiasm for a regenerated world, in which nature should supplant fashion, justice prevail, and men, free and equal, would walk erect in simple dignity, was the deceptive rallying call of Adam Weishaupt's Illumination. And again, you also, you look at all of these rabbit hole type, writings that have come out, like the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And you look at the blueprint within that book, and you will again see the same outline and the same motives that exactly mirror those of the Jesuit order. But people flock to these things and say it's the Zionists. Oh, it's the Illuminati. When document upon document upon document has proved without a shadow of a doubt that this Society of Jesus Order was the originators of this structure that has been permeated on down to the Illuminati and Zionism and all of these types of things. So again, you have to ask the question, who really was behind all of these secret societies? In this society of the future, everything, according to Weishaupt, was to be regulated by enlightenment. Men were to be liberated from their silly prejudices, to become mature and moral, and thus to outgrow the religious and political tutelage of church and state, of priest and prince. Morals was the science which makes man mature, and renders him conscious of his dignity, his destiny, and his power. The principal means for effecting the redemption of the world was found in unification, and this was to be brought about by secret schools of wisdom. These schools, he declares, quote, were always the archives of nature and of the rights of man. Through their agency, man will recover from his fall. Princes and nations, without violence to force them, will vanish from the earth. The human race will become one family, and the world the habitation of rational beings. Moral science alone will effect these reforms. Imperceptibly, every father will become like Abraham and the patriarchs, the priest and absolute lord of his household, and reason will be man's only code of law. Unquote. It was taught that this redemption of mankind by the restoration of the original freedom and equality through illumination and universal charity, fraternity, and tolerance is likewise the true esoteric doctrine of Christ and his apostles. Those in whom the illuminating grace of Christ is operative are the Illuminati. The object of pure, that is, illuminated, Freemasonry is none other than the propagation of the Enlightenment, whereby the seed of a new world will be so widely scattered that no efforts at extirpation, however violent, will avail to prevent the harvest. Weishaupt declared that Masonry was the school from which these ideas emanated. The ultimate object of the Illuminati order was kept secret. Only by degrees could the initiated learn of the true mysteries and purpose of the order. The lower nursery degrees, now bear in mind, you're going to see the same mirrored image of this Scottish Rite Masonry that was essentially a universal or Catholic creation that blended into so-called Templar Protestant Freemasonry, and you're going to see the same pattern, the same exact pattern. The ultimate object of the Illuminati order was kept secret. Only by degrees could the initiated learn of the true mysteries and purposes of the order. The lower nursery degrees, which included preparation, novice, minerval, and illuminatus minor, were to serve for the selection, preparation, and concealment of the true Illuminati. The higher mysteries degrees, that included presbyter, priest, prince, regent, magus. Interesting that one of the degrees is called magus. Remember Simon Magus in the Bible? And rex, which is the last degree, being Weishaupt himself, were to open the way for the social organization of the future, in which all distinction of nations, creeds, etc. would disappear. Each step of the way of the initiate was very carefully plotted and planned by Weishaupt and his colleagues, so that the squeamish and gullible never rose higher than the lowest degrees, while the bold, ruthless, and cynical, those ready and willing to dispense with religion, morality, patriotism, and any other hindrances, rose to the top. The Illuminati also offered an even more attractive inducement than its long-range goal. It offered immediate and assured success. For through its connections and intrigues, the conspiracy was able to place its selected members in positions of influence and power, where they could enjoy all the glories of worldly success, provided they used that success to work unceasingly for the advancement of the order. Doesn't that sound vaguely familiar? Members were acquainted only with their immediate superiors, and only a selected few knew that Weishaupt was the founder and supreme head of the order. So here we have a general, superior general, so to speak, and just like the Jesuit general, who rarely ever makes a public appearance, who rarely ever shows his face, the same concept was used by Weishaupt. Is this all of this just a coincidence? Bear in mind his training. Members were obliged to gather information on every person with whom they had dealings, and on all matters which could possibly affect either themselves or the order. They were to hand in sealed reports. These were opened by superiors unknown to the writers, and were in substance referred to the general. All illuministic and official organs, the press, schools, seminaries, cathedral chapters, hence all appointments to seize pulpits and chairs, were to be brought as far as possible under the influence of the organization. Princes themselves were to be surrounded by a legion of enlightened men, in order not only to disarm their opposition, but also to compel their energetic cooperation. A complete transformation would thus be effected. Public opinion would be controlled. Priests and princes, quote unquote, would find their hands tied. Those who ventured to interfere would have to retreat from the reckless impulse. The order would become an object of dread to all enemies. The architects drew up their blueprints. The French Revolution massacres revealed the results. The Jesuits, Adam Weishaupt's mentors and molders. A great collusion was at work here, not springing forth from young Adam Weishaupt's innovations, but instead that powerful and influential cabal who from a child up were his instructors. It is they who plant the New World utopian seed into his brain, where they cultivate it, and as he grows, to nourish, prune, and train meticulously, then wait to reap the sweet fruits of their labor. These are Jesuit connivings, where the new order only means one thing: Catholic in scope. And with this end in view, will surely sanctify whatever means. Weishaupt's mentors and molders were not long in producing results. As a base of operations and a front for their illuminated Freemasonry, in 1775 the Lodge Theodore of Good Counsel, a lodge of strict observance, was erected at Munich by a Professor Bader of the University of Ingolstadt. It received its constitutional patent from the Royal York at Berlin. 2 years later, in 1777, and 1 year after Weishaupt had founded the Illuminati Order, 1776, interesting, he then became initiated into the Lodge Theodore. Within 2 years after that, he was in control of the lodge. Are we to believe that just one genius of a man working nearly single-handedly, or a dozen for that matter, could within a couple of years take control of a lodge, unless it was pre-planned that way? In 1780, to further expand his Illuminati membership, Freiherr von Nigg, a Masonic agent of wide experience and well known in all Masonic circles, joined forces with Adam Weishaupt. For the next 2 years, the marvelous accomplishments attained nearly go beyond words. To better give support, a quotation from the 1910 Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 7, page 661, topic Illuminati, states that Nigg, in company with Weishaupt, quote, worked vigorously to extend the order, for which within 2 years he secured 500 members. When the great International Convention of Freemasons was held at Wilhelmsbad on July 16th to August 29th of 1782, the Illuminati Freemasonry with Nigg and Weishaupt now proclaimed to be the only pure Freemasonry, had already gained such a reputation that almost all the members of the convention clamored for admission into the new institution. Particularly valuable for the order was the accession of Bode, who commanded the highest respect in all Masonic circles. Assisted by Bode, Nigg labored diligently to convert the whole Masonic body into Illuminati Freemasons. A number of the most prominent representatives of Freemasonry and Enlightenment became Illuminati, including in 1783, Duke Ferdinand of Brunswick, the foremost leader of European Freemasonry and the princely representative of the Illuminism of his age. Other famous members were Goethe, Herder, and Nicolai. The order was also propagated in Sweden, Russia, Poland, Denmark, Hungary, Austria, and France. But in 1783, dissensions arose between Nigg and Weishaupt, which resulted in the final withdrawal of the former on July 1st, 1784. Nigg could no longer endure Weishaupt's pedantic domineering, which frequently assumed offensive forms. Now pay attention to this one. He accused Weishaupt of Jesuitism and suspected him of being, quote, a Jesuit in disguise, unquote. Take it as he will. One of the most fascinating phenomena when studying the histories of the American and French revolutions is the consistent silence and omission of the role that Freemasonry had to play in them. Most all general histories never even mention it, and if at all, it is only alluded to. It is unbelievable when you consider that there were hundreds of thousands of members belonging to Freemasonry during those times. Some very prominent men of history, distinguished in their careers and professors of every kind. But go to any encyclopedia or history book and see if it mentions these men as being Masons. You won't find it. Rest assured, if Freemasonry hides the truth of its goals from its own members, do you think it would do any less toward the general public? This knowledge is censored and covered up. The darkest secrecy is its breeding ground. So if the reader is skeptical of the implications here presented, it must be acknowledged that even the Roman Catholic Church, and in its own encyclopedia, must admit that the Illuminati order existed, and somehow arose from one of its own Jesuit professors, whose goal was nothing less than to secure the triumph of the Enlightenment in church and state. Rome is compelled to admit to this as being a fact, if for nothing else than to officially disagree with the movement. However, official and unofficial are two quite different animals. Another argument, which is persistently used, is that although the Illuminati order became such a menace to the Bavarian government and Europe in its overwhelming subversive activities, causing it to be officially suppressed, and so therefore no longer active, is contradicted in the Catholic Encyclopedia under the same topic of Illuminati, where it states, quote, "As the activity of the Illuminati still continued, 4 successive enactments were issued against them. June 22nd, 1784, March 2nd, and August 16th of 1785, and August 16th of 1787. In the last of which recruiting for the order was forbidden under penalty of death. These measures put an end to the corporate existence of the order in Bavaria, and as a result of the publication, in 1786, of its decrees and other documents concerning it, for the most part of a rather compromising nature, its further extension outside Bavaria became impossible. The spread of the spirit of the Illuminati, which coincided substantially with the general teachings of the Enlightenment, especially that of France, was rather accelerated than retarded by the persecution in Bavaria." Unquote. Now, isn't that a rather interesting admission? First, its further extension outside Bavaria became impossible. But after its suppression, the spread of the spirit of the Illuminati, which especially coincided with the Enlightenment of France, was rather accelerated than retarded. That seems similar to when the Jesuit order was dissolved. Supposedly, the Jesuits ceased to be, but being officially suppressed, yet allowing all members to be free to function, becomes more of a benefit than a hindrance. So the suppression was in favor, not against them. They only burrow deeper underground and using keen precaution to conceal themselves, work their mischief quietly without the hazard of blame being placed on them. And so what happens? It's the Jews. It's the Illuminati. It's the Freemasons. It's the Rothschild. It's the bankers. I think what's really going on here is that when many of us think of Jesuit priests, we just simply think of those men out there in these churches and these black garbs and black garbs with the little white collar thingamabobber on their neck and these types of things, and they just don't, they don't bear a threat, because it's like, what are they gonna do? Okay. But what you don't understand is it's not what you see, it's what you don't see and what's hidden behind those priestly garbs and these types of things. that they are able to work behind the scenes, even dressed up as regular civilians, in order to accomplish their aim without ever even you knowing a thing. And then all they have to do is just pick a patsy. The Jews, the Rothschilds, the Zionists. Adam Weishaupt comes home. In 1835, the Carbonaro Malagari wrote to another member of the Carbonari, a secret society that accomplished the French Revolution and was active in supporting the political principles that were proclaimed during that time, said, quote, "We form an association of brothers in all points of the globe. We have desires and interests in common. We aim at the emancipation of humanity. We wish to break every kind of yoke, yet there is one that is unseen that can hardly be felt. Yet that weighs on us. Whence comes it? Where is it? No one knows, or at least no one tells. The association is secret, even for us, the veterans of secret societies." As the previous paragraph stated, the quote-unquote suppression of the Jesuit order was probably the best thing it could have happened to it, and it was planned that way. Records show that Adam Weishaupt fled Ingolstadt in February 1785, going north to Regensburg. Later in 1787, and going farther north, he settled in Gotha. The Catholic Encyclopedia, again under the topic Illuminati, page 662, states, quote, "After 1787, he renounced all active connection with secret societies and again drew near to the church." Oh my goodness, the prodigal son returns. And that just happens with all of these other supposed rogue individuals that left the Jesuit order or the Catholic Church for some reason near the close of their life or something like that. They always return home. And then you have to ask the question, did they ever leave in the first place? Displaying remarkable zeal in buildings of the Catholic Church at Gotha. He died on November 18th, 1839, reconciled with the Catholic Church, which as a young professor he had doomed to death and destruction. Well, of course. As the Chronicle of the Catholic Parish in Gotha relates, unquote, "How emotional! After serving well in his duties to become the leader of one of the most sinister movements in history, the erring child then returns home to be welcomed with open arms. Just another typical example of, what's that word we used a few times already? Roman Catholic what? Double face?" I need to, before we continue this reading, I need to read a portion of this extreme oath of the Jesuits so you can get a clear example of what's going on here. And I'm going to read the portion, the first couple paragraphs of when the Superior speaks. But before I do that, I want to read what the Catholic Encyclopedia stated on page 662 under the topic Illuminati. This is the 1910 encyclopedia, by the way. I want to read this again. After 1787, he renounced all active connection with secret societies and again drew near to the church, displaying remarkable zeal in building of the Catholic Church at Gotha. He died on November 8th, 1839. Reconciled with the Catholic Church, which as a young professor he had doomed to death and destruction. Unquote. As the Chronicle of the Catholic Parish in Gotha relates, how emotional, after serving well in his duties to become the leader of one of the most sinister movements in history, the erring child then returns home to be welcomed with open arms. Just another typical example of Roman Catholic double-face. And this extreme oath of the Jesuits, where the superior speaks, first couple paragraphs I'm going to read. My son, heretofore you have been taught to act the dissembler among Roman Catholics, to be a Roman Catholic, and to be a spy even among your own brethren, to believe no man, to trust no man, among the reformers to be a reformer. And the reformers were against the Roman Catholics, right? Among the Huguenots to be a Huguenot, among the Calvinists to be a Calvinist, among other Protestants generally to be a Protestant, and obtaining their confidence, to seek even to preach from their pulpits, and to denounce with all vehemence in your nature our holy religion and the Pope, and even to descend so low as to become a Jew among Jews, that you might be enabled to gather together all information for the benefit of your order as a faithful soldier of the Pope. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces, states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions, American and French revolutions, and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences, and enjoying the blessings of peace, to take sides with the combatants, and to act secretly with your brother Jesuit, who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that which you might be connected, only that the Church might be the gainer in the end, and the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. So as long as the means are justified, or so as long as the ends are met and it justifies the means, regardless of, Adam Weishaupt here, as a young professor, condemned the Catholic Church, which as a young professor had doomed to death and destruction. You can do these things. You can act on the other side. You can act as the enemy, so as for the ends justifies the means. And then after the end justifies the means, you then just, simply just return home. You've accomplished your mission. And that's clearly what happened. And that is what is completely left out when all of these so-called ex-Freemasons and ex-Illuminists come out and expose the Illuminati. They completely leave this part out. Oh, sure, they'll talk about Hegelian dialectic till you're blue in the face. But folks, you got to understand that even these secret societies are part of the Hegelian dialectic. And there's only one order that is behind the scenes maneuvering the puppet strings of these secret societies. And they would have not been able to go so underground had it not been for that suppression of that order in 1773. It's something to consider big time. Anyways, moving on with the final two sections of this chapter. The Illuminati spirit epidemic contaminates France. The spirit, quote-unquote, of the Illuminati settled over the nation of France, like a heavy fog tainted with poison, and the whole country heaved from its effects. The first symptoms, which later erupted into the Great French Revolution of 1789, were felt from the groundwork that had been wonderfully prepared by the philosophies. Those French school of thinkers, writers, scientists, and men of letters, who gradually altered the traditional thoughts of the people. From these, the altered expressions of thought spread and found safety and refuge in the secrecy of Freemasonic lodges, where they virtually littered the French communities and cities. It is from here that the germ of revolution spread like a disease. But understand, it was Illuminized, quote-unquote, Freemasonry that produced the French upheaval, that actually made the revolution, that created anarchy and sent the people into the streets in a frenzy and savage delirium. It was those principles introduced into the lodges of France in 1787 by the disciples of Weishaupt, patriarch of the Jacobins, quote-unquote, that culminated into such butchery that became known to history as the Reign of Terror. But these ferocious, merciless, indiscriminate massacres and mutilations always seem to accompany Jesuit promptings, whether it is the St. Bartholomew or Irish massacres, the 30 Years' War, or the French Revolution, and is akin to being satanic. But who could ever blame the Jesuits for the French Revolution? They were banished. Oh. To take sides with the combatants and to act secretly with your brother Jesuit who might be engaged on the other side but openly opposed to that with which you might be connected, only that the Church might be the gainer in the end, in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and at the end justifies the means. It doesn't matter how bloody or how debauched, events, events are played out. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much blood is spilled. Because who is going to believe the Jesuits are behind everything now? Because they're banished. And so this seed has been planted, and it has borne its fruit. It has borne its fruit. All you got to do is look at the rabbit holes of conspiracies today, and who gets the blames? It's the Illuminati. It's the Freemasons. It's the Jews. It's the Rothschilds, the bankers. Because after all, the Jesuits now are just little teeny itty bitty parish priests that occupy churches, and yeah, you have universities, but yeah, so what? They don't have a say in anything anymore. Sure, they were reestablished, but think about it. After the successes of the American and French Revolution, the ends did justify the means, now didn't it? So now there was no reason for them to be banished anymore, because now they can continue as a reestablished order again. Great Freemasonic Convention produces American Revolution. You gotta remember, the French Revolution happened after the American Revolution, but you can really understand what's going on in the American Revolution by looking at the French Revolution, because we've all been brainwashed with our history books and these types of things about the Declaration of Independence and how everything was about tea and taxes and these types of things. But when you look at the French Revolution, that even though it happened after the American Revolution, you look at the French Revolution, and there you have the template for what happened in the American Revolution. The American and French Revolutions were tied intimately together by the same conspiracies of Rome, well concealed behind the covers of the Illuminati order and Freemasonry. This is not to say that all those caught up in the movement understood exactly where it was coming from or where it was headed. Yet names prominent in one revolution were also involved in the other. For example, Lafayette, who was introduced into Freemasonry at a very young age, married married at 18 a girl child of only 14 years. And after making her pregnant, felt such an obsession for fame and glory, spurred on by his intense hatred for anything English, left France secretly 1 year after his marriage, not even telling his young wife, to fight under George Washington in his cause for the American colonies' independence. In his haste to leave France, unnoticed with several of his adventurous friends, he could not find a ship departing. So as a young aristocrat with financial means, he just up and bought a ship of his own to serve his purpose. He sailed and landed, going straight to Charleston, South Carolina. After receiving his Masonic instructions, he traveled north to join George Washington. There were over 27,000 Frenchmen who fought in the American War for Independence that were involved in the deciding Battle of Yorktown, 15 miles from where the author was born and raised. The French general Rochambeau and a soldier named Alexander Berthier, later to become general under Napoleon Bonaparte, who invaded Rome and took Pope Pius VI prisoner, camped in the area known as White Marsh, Maryland. Even those that acknowledge the aspect of, these times, hasn't got a clue. Especially those in the SDA circles, they just totally overlook this. I mean, let me read this again, because it was this Alexander Berthier, the same general who was responsible for inflicting that supposed mortal wound that would be later healed in the later part of the early 20th century. The French general Rochambeau and a soldier named Alexander Berthier, later to become general under Napoleon Bonaparte, who invaded Rome and took Pope Pius VI prisoner, camped in the area known as White Marsh, Maryland. These men later were both active in the French Revolution. Unbelievable. After Lafayette returned to France to become one of the leading members of the French Revolution, there were numerous letters exchanged between him and George Washington, and in like manner, American statesmen Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were active members of the French Masonic Lodge of the Nine Sisters. The vigorous Freemasonry activity exercised during the revolt of England's North American colonies had a much greater significance attached to it than what is seen on the surface. Separating the colonies from England became more a subtle victory for Rome over England, rather than the colonies' victory over England for their independence. That's what it was all about. Practicing Catholicism publicly in the colonies under England's rule was stringently forbidden. Okay? Let me repeat that. Practicing Catholicism publicly in the colonies under England's rule was stringently forbidden. So again, one has to ask the question, this whole struggle for independence over England, who did it benefit more? Did it benefit the colonies, or did it benefit Rome? Now, with America declared as a republic, offering religious freedom to all, Catholicism became free to practice its own religion uninhibited. And regardless of all the hype and glorious propaganda that each of us have been taught about the American Revolution, freeing Romanism in the North American colonies was the concealed and true motive. The product of the first great Freemasonic convention held in 1768 was the American Revolution. But the grand design of Rome had far greater plans for America, a much more grandiose future than just being liberated from England. Plans made even before its birth. And should anyone care to catch a glimpse of the strange work Rome has planned for America, what her strategy and tactics will be, actually what's in store for all humanity when Rome makes her final thrust for world dominion, then make a study of the French Revolution. And thus we conclude this chapter, chapter 11, Architects of the Grand Design. And chapter 12 will be called The Perpetrators and Evolution of the Great French Revolution. And again, the American Revolution was one thing. But when you look at the French Revolution, and you look at that blueprint, well, we hear, on my channel I talk about it a lot, types and shadows. The French Revolution is just a type. You want to know what the whole antitypical aspect of this French Revolution is going to be? This is where we have to begin our study and start looking into, because what we see go on a grand scale is what happened as a result of the French Revolution. And so this is what we're going to be getting into next. I told you this book is going to get more interesting as we go deeper in. So I want to thank you for listening. Truth be told, truth be known. Stay safe. God bless. We'll see you next time. I understand this is a lot of stuff that you probably have not heard before. But I believe it needs to be put out there. There's a lot of people doing book readings and these types of things. And I think these books need to be read. Whether you have them on your person or you're listening to them here. First and foremost, you need to keep your eyes focused on the Bible, okay? But there's some blessed authors out there, I believe, that has gone in great length, and even though some of the things doctrinally, just like in the Protestant circles, you might have disagreements with, but when it comes to the aspect of Romanism, and even researchers today that still hold on to the truth of the spirit of prophecy, of Rome being the little horn, the Antichrist power of the Bible, I think it's imperative to give credit where credit is due with the work that these researchers and authors are doing. And that is why there's people like myself and others going into great length of bringing these books to light. Okay, but I have to stress, and I have to stress, that if you do not have Jesus Christ, and you do not acknowledge what He did for you on that cross on Calvary, then all of this, what I'm reading here, is just going to go over your head. It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to matter, because this, what I'm reading here, is not going to determine your eternity. It would be better for you not even to know this. If you have not Christ, you would be better off keeping yourself in the Gospels. Okay? That's pretty much all I have to say. So, even though, this history is fascinating, and it is fascinating, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't make a difference if you have not Christ. That's the most important thing out of all of this. So, again, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. God bless.